Hey gang, hey, it's just me this time. Dre Harrison back at it once again with a brand new video for you. Hope you guys have been well. Hope you guys have been enjoying all the video podcasts we've put back up on YouTube to catch up, shall we say, in the process. We're still about 2 or 3 behind where we need to be optimally, but you'll see them keep coming up in the next few days or so. It's why I've not generally done as many video blogs as I normally have done, because I've kind of gotten myself out of the way so we can focus on the full reboot of Motorsport 101, I guess you could say. Series 3, I guess, we're hopefully without the disappointment of not challenging for a world title, given we make jokes about Bottas for doing the same thing. New year, new me, and all of that. Anyway, hope you guys are enjoying the content. I'll still be doing these video blogs every once in a while to get us even more regular content on the channel, so, if you like them, leave a thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. Really do appreciate it. But it was inevitable I was going to talk about this. My boy, Sebastian Vettel, has finally announced his future. He is going to Aston Martin next year, formerly Racing Point. We all know that they'll be rebooting as the Aston Martin Formula 1 team next year. And yeah, Sebastian's on board. Couldn't believe it. You have your doubts about these things. There was a lot of talk in the air about retirement, and Vettel talked about it in the press conference yesterday where he said, well, look, I was pretty close to retiring, and, if he was going to stay on, it was always going to be Racing Point, but he needed time to think for himself of whether he wanted to continue racing or not. And apparently when he was at the Parabolica at Monza this past weekend and seeing the cars go through the apex, I think apparently that's when he made the decision that, yeah, I still want to be here. Vettel really is one of us. He's a proper fan of the sport, and, it's interesting. I mean, as a Vettel fan, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you as if the last year hasn't been painful as hell, but if there's one little thing that gives me a lot of solace in all of this, it's that the way Ferrari has fallen, the way they have struggled in the last few months, and maybe 18 months if you want to go back that far, is kind of a little bit of vindication towards Vettel's struggles, where I think a lot of people have kind of given them a pass for the last year and a half because of how much the team has fallen by the wayside. Charles has had some phenomenal performances, the 4th at Silverstone, the 2nd in Austria during the opening round, but the Ferrari's a shitbox. They went from the 2nd best team in the championship this year to currently, as I'm recording this video, 6th. They're not even in the top half of the table. They're fighting Alfa Romeo and Haas for minor points at the moment. That's how much this team has fallen, and the outlook continued to look bleak. I mean, Matteo Binotto's spoken about how there's going to be no more major upgrades for this car. It's a lost cause. They haven't got engine tokens to spend, and whatnot. There's no point developing this car any further, and given that the development of this car is going to be largely frozen through next season as well, there's going to be a lot of carryover, only very minor tweaks to the regulations. There's no reason to think Ferrari is suddenly going to turn this around either. So, if anything, as a Vettel fan, I'm glad he's getting out of there, quite frankly, and I'm glad he's going to a team that's on the rise. Racing Point is having a fantastic season, even after the 15-point deduction they had for their brake ducts. They are currently, I think they're 4th in the Constructors' Championship right now. They have a genuine shot at a top 3 spot this year, which is phenomenal. This has been, pound for pound, their best ever season in Formula 1 as the outfit that we know them, as the outfit formerly known as Force India. They've been 4th a couple of times as best of the rest, but now with Ferrari falling by the wayside, a spot's opened up in the top 3, and don't get me wrong, it's going to be a hard fight for them against McLaren, because McLaren's also been very good. Carlos Sainz just had his career high finish in that miracle at Monza, and Lando's had a podium too. I mean, Lando was disappointed at finishing 4th at Monza, which again just goes to show you how far this team has come as a team on the rise. And yeah, there's a lot of promise in Racing Point. They're not just talking about surviving anymore. They've got a big Aston Martin reboot. They've got a lot of money coming into the team from Lawrence Stroll and his investors. They're not thinking about survival anymore. They're thinking now about having a budget and competing and developing, and I think that is ultimately the biggest reason why they've gone after Sebastian and why Sergio Perez has missed out. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty with Perez in a minute, but you're not just talking about Vettel as a driver, you're probably talking about him as a brand ambassador. Aston Martin on social media were very excited about this move, and they had him showing off with custom Seb plates on their Aston Martins in the factory already, so you can see there's excitement in the air. And let's not forget, you're talking about Ferrari's biggest fan, and Aston Martin's just snagged him. That's a massive, massive deal. It's a statement of intent for a brand new factory team that's going to be out here in Formula 1, and there's no compensating for a four-time world champion. As said, Sebastian's hardly been at his best for the last couple of years, but there is an extended warranty on Sebastian Vettel because he's earned that right. You know, he's one of the best Formula 1 drivers we've ever seen. I think it'd be hard pushed not to have him in a top 6 to 8 list of all-time greats. Even if he's maybe a couple of years past his best, again, maybe a new team, a fresh start, a new direction for them would be big. A lot of people were immediately sad for Sergio Perez. Again, completely understandable. Look, Sergio Perez is a fine driver. He's an excellent driver. He's been one of the drivers of the decade. I've said this on our website. I've said it before on the podcast. He's the king of the midfielders. He's been, driving excellent midfield level cars on a very high level for pretty much his entire career. It's hard to believe it's his 10th season. He's still, I think, only 29, 30 years old. And he's still one of the better drivers in the grid. He's one of the safest pairs of hands you could possibly have. He can develop teams to a high level as a lead driver. And, he is a guy that is very, very hard to drop. We all knew that Lance Stroll was never going to lose his seat in this situation, and a lot of people wanted to pour one out. I was a bit more cynical about this on Twitter yesterday. The reason why I say that is because Sergio Perez did finally get a 3-year deal after years of rolling 1-year contracts, but there was an option. There was an optional buyout clause in the contract, and if there's anything I've seen in sports contracts in general, if you put the option out there, you've got to be thinking in the back of your head what could lead to a team triggering this. And it's not Checo's performance. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's just the fact that when Sebastian Vettel hits the open market and you've actually gotten a genuine chance to snag him, you'd be doing yourself a disservice not to explore that avenue. Otmar was very honest. He said, look, Stroll's dad owns the team. And even if it wasn't a situation where Lance's surname wasn't Stroll, there was a viable argument to keep him. Lance Stroll is 4th in the Drivers' Championship right now. I still think he has limitations as a driver. I still don't think he's a particularly great qualifier, for example, and I think he gives himself a little bit too much work to do in races sometimes. But he's best of the rest right now. The big three is locked in stone between Hamilton, Bottas and Verstappen. They're in another league right now to everybody else. Like, Stroll, is 4th in the championship. He's ahead of Lando Norris on countback. Even without his daddy's connotations, there's a very, very strong argument you can make for Lance still being there as a young, dynamic driver that can still improve. He's still only 21 years old, and he's only in his 3rd season, and he's a guy that's now putting his racing point in good positions week in, week out. You can't really ask for much more than that. So even if, in my opinion at least, even if you're talking about the greater context of racing point and who to keep, I think there'd be a viable argument for Lance over Checo. And I'm not saying Checo is bad, hardly. Checo's fantastic. But teams are thinking about the future constantly. I think teams are going to be looking for the next Max Verstappen as opposed to looking for the next Sergio Perez. I've said it before about MotoGP. No one's looking for veterans anymore. They're all looking for the next Marc Marquez. It's the same principle on 4 wheels, I think. And I do feel a little bit bad for Checo, but when there's a buyout clause in your contract, you've got to be thinking of the possibility of it being activated. He said in his statement on Twitter when the announcement was made that he doesn't have a plan B, and I don't really believe him on that, because he admitted in Austria that other teams had conversations with him about possibly signing him for 2021. The options are out there for him. I mean, I think Haas, they're apparently eyeing up 8 to 10 drivers apparently are on their shortlist. They'd be hard pushed to find a better driver on their shortlist than Sergio Perez to lead their team. You know, I guess it's a fantastic driver, so why not have him as your lead? I think he's probably a little bit better than either of their current drivers at Haas. I know we kind of dunk on them a little bit for being a bit stale in keeping Grosjean and Magnussen, but they're two pretty good drivers. I stand by Grosjean a little bit more because I know when the car is good, he is good. And Haas have not had a good car for 2 years now. So the drivers probably deserve a bly for that alone. And I'm glad that they have done that at Haas so far. But I think Gene has spoken a bit more openly about having a younger driver in their program next year. And that's going to be the big problem because Haas and Alfa are kind of in the same boat. I think at least 2 of those drivers in those 2 teams respectively are going to be let go at the end of the year. Looking at the situation at Alfa Romeo, I'll get into that in a bit more detail probably in a future video because I want to talk about Alfa, Haas and the Ferrari Driver Academy situation at some point. The big collateral here is Antonio Giovinazzi, who's not been particularly great since coming back to Formula 1. Kimi Raikkonen's 41 next month I should say. Kimi Raikkonen's coming up on his 41st birthday, and there's a lot of rumblings about his potential retirement, whether Alfa moves on from him. And we have a very hungry Ferrari Driver Academy, and I'm sure that at least one of them will end up in Formula 1 next year, between Callum Ilott, Robert Schwartzman, Mick Schumacher. They're all vying for seats in Formula 1, and all 3 are probably good enough to be in Formula 1 next year. So Perez, you're throwing his name into that cauldron with all those young drivers that want a seat and are hungry and are young and are potentially very, very talented. It could be a messy situation. I'm surprised Will Buxton on Twitter hasn't mentioned IndyCar yet, because he always does whenever a decent Formula 1 midfielder hasn't got a seat for 2021 or the following year. He'll go, well, why not IndyCar? Because we've done that before with guys like Kevin Magnussen, and IndyCar themselves have hired a lot of middle-of-the-road Formula 1 drivers in the past, going back to Max Chilton, Marcus Ericsson, and the real big feel-good story out of that field, Alexander Rossi, who's now one of the best drivers in the world, pound for pound. Checo could easily go over there, I think, and be a very good driver if he wanted to be. And it would be a big pull for his Mexican fans, because he's a big, big name back in Mexico. So in North American motorsport would have a big boost, I think, if Checo went over there. As a Vettel fan, I'm excited. I'm really excited for this. I'm delighted he'll still be there on the grid. Look, honestly, I was at peace if he was going to retire, because the Ferrari situation was so bad that, honestly, him sailing off into the sunset, I would have completely understood. He man's got 3 kids at home. He hasn't got anything left to prove to anyone. He's a 50-plus Grand Prix winner with 4 World Championships. He's one of the best ever. There's no doubt about that. But I'm very intrigued to see him and Lance Stroll most likely in the Aston Martin team for next year. It's a great lineup. It's an exciting brand, and it's an exciting move for Formula 1, and it's nice to see that one of the most universally liked drivers in the field now is still going to be with us and is hopefully going to be in a competitive seat again. Something that Ferrari isn't. But let me know what you make of the situation when it comes to Vettel, when it comes to Perez, the future of Aston Martin. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I've been Dre, good to see you back, and hopefully you'll stick around for more video podcasts and more blogs from me very, very soon. Till then, sayonara.